we can move to the general discussion. And I have several people in the queue which we could incorporate in the general discussion, if that's okay. All right. So we're going to move to the general discussion. Now, we have one person online, Elizabeth Schultz. I don't know if she is available because she was in the queue quite a while ago for the general discussion.
I'm here.
Okay, Elizabeth, well, why don't you go ahead and then I'll pick up with my queue.
Thank you. I just have to start by saying that the brilliance of today's presentations almost made up for my disappointment in not being able to be present at the audience with the Holy Father. Well, not really, but it was a wonderful day that I'm privileged to have been able to participate in. My particular question was for Professor Zamagni, and I absolutely love the work that you do. I think of particular brilliance is the idea of the life cycle approach to employment and the intertemporal labor flexibility that you would like to build in. It has always seemed to me self-evident that we could harness the complementarity of the different energies and life cycles of men and women in families in very productive ways. That doesn't happen. And but my question really is about that notion of complementarity. Your description of the genome of the family describes it as incorporating a notion of complementarity that is a very particular kind of notion of complementarity. And there's a woman, a theologian named Prudence Allen, who was a member of the International Theological Commission, who has done a lot of work on the notions of complementarity as developed by through the work of Edith Stein and Pope St. John Paul II. And she would characterize what you're describing as fractional complementarity as opposed to integral complementarity. And what she would, the way that you can understand that is think about mathematical formulas. Your notion describes woman as half, a man as half, and coming together they create the one whole. She thinks it's reasonable to think instead of integral complementarity, that the woman is a whole soul given the gender that she has, the man is a whole soul given the gender that he has, and that so it's a one and a one, and when they come together, there is relationality in their interactions that is impossible without the difference that creates a three. So the equation is 1 + 1 = 3. And I find a lot of richness in that notion and that way of thinking about complementarity. I think it invites a lot of people into the conversation that might not necessarily find themselves in typical family situations. She says that the three is most often a child, but it could also be a fuller product of work that is, or a fuller idea or an invention that is only comes to fruition as something new by the two different genders working on it. And I wonder, given that there's so much relationality built into that notion of complementarity, and that's what we're trying to recover here in the context of thinking about the family, I wonder if you've thought about or rejected incorporating or expanding the notion of complementarity in your understanding of the family, or would that somehow do violence to something that would have ripple effects on the rest of your thought?
Okay, thank you. Stefano, do you? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yes. Okay, so I know we've got in the queue, I've got Jutta.
I have a question to our president, and it also, first of all, thank you very much for the paper. Second, I actually agree with your criticism to the OECD definition that the family has to adjust to the labor market, but it should be otherwise. But then the question is, if you have this life cycle approach in labor force participation, then it needs a huge amount of redistribution, or it needs some sort of basic income, because you have to make, your means end in times where you don't work. So I would like you to share your thoughts on this. May I also ask my question, the other question? Or should we now focus on this paper first? General discussion. Okay, then I will continue with my thanks for your presentation. And here I have the question what family-friendly means. I mean, what actually is the target? Is the target to help parents? Is the target to help the children? So are you claiming or going for basic children rights as we do it in Germany right now? Is it providing or targeting at the labor market, or is it targeting for the infrastructure of children? Those are huge questions which we are discussing right now, not just in Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. I agree with you. If you want to implement what we just said, a measure such as a basic income or universal income, whatever are the wording, is necessary. But what is more important is to take into serious consideration the principle of subsidiarity, because that is the point. Subsidiarity has a major implication, namely co-programming and co-management. Perhaps non-Italian do not know, but the Italian Constitutional Court last year, in the sentence number 131, for the first time introduced exactly this principle. And it was Minister Cartabia. At the time, she was president of the Constitutional Court. And that is a big novelty. And I understand that in Europe, they are following suit. Because once in a while, Italy was the first to introduce it, which means concretely the following. When there are to discuss, for instance, national contract of labor, families as such play no role, because you have trade unions and they represent individual workers, and you have the business world. And if you raise the question, what about the families association? But now, with this, after this new sentence, the situation will change. Of course, Vincenzo knows, Vincenzo Bassi, but we are not yet ready, because our family association, they are not accustomed so far to understand the practical implication of the principle of subsidiarity, because they use subsidiarity in the old sense, which is obsolete. So I am sure that the best way to look into the future is to give real power to family associations, but real power, not in the form of giving them some say benefit, etc., which is not bad, but that is not. The family association should intervene at the negotiation level which is called co-programming, in Italian coprogrammazione and coprogettazione, and that is, in my opinion, a venue which might produce good results.
Question. My approach to this is holistic. I cannot emphasize enough of what you've said in terms of the significance of these specialist areas, parents, children, labor market, infrastructure. Our society tends to break it up into little bits and deal with it in that way. I think that attempts to do that are effectively nullified somewhat, because unless you take the holistic approach, you will not have the cost benefit transferred across to each part of the whole. And I think that the argument about that is that the children and the parents they coexist. One will help the other. And I think that once you get an integration into the system, you actually, I remember a good friend, Frank Field, Nordfield now, he actually understood that point. He may not have implemented it in his policy particularly well, but he understood it. Where the sticking point is, and I won't say very much more on this, but the sticking point is that departmental, shall we say, jealousies impede the notion. Because what you're saying is the Labour Department, the Education Department, the Children Department, these are all segments of the whole. And you know very well that the intercooperation is impossible. Impossible. I don't know why. It's a cultural thing. But my own view is the cross-boundary nature of it. And that's why when I did my mediation, I made it crystal clear to the then Secretary of State for Justice, it was not his decision as to how things should go. It was my recommendation. And it was, at the end of the day, his responsibility to reject, accept, or whatever. You cannot separate out the bits, slicing it. That's my view. So I hope that helps.
All right. Yes, Gustavo. Yes, Gustavo.
I will make a very brief comment about the remarks, Marcelo's remarks, John's previous remarks, and also Vincenzo. And that has to do with the children adoption rules and procedures in Europe. We are in Argentina a foster family. We take care of children in process of being adopted, and we are suffering for a terrible level of slowness. You can take care of a children at home for many years. They suffer a lot, and the bureaucratic entangling of all these processes is a real nightmare. It has to do with the different parts of the governments that make the work, but very isolated, and also with very old systems. And that is also related with children trafficking, because sometimes the rules are very entangled theoretically in order to avoid children trafficking, but are provoking another type of damage. So I would like to listen from you the situation in Europe and how do you think that this problem could be solved?
I can tell you that in Italy the inquiry is quite long and also very painful for the couples, because it takes time and it's not a good travel for the procedure for the trial. It's a big point because what we see is that sometimes the length of the procedure depends also on the power of the social work. And sometimes they have a very big power, which is very difficult to control. And we had also in Italy some case which is very painful. And also because these difficulties may promote also bad practice like surrogacy, for example, because it's a tragedy. So I don't want it is funny, but you know, if you think that in order to adopt a child, you have to follow a very tough procedure, and in some countries you can have the surrogacy and you do not have any problem. There is a contradiction with the system. Now the point is, even in this case, I think that as Professor Zamagni says, we are not prepared to take on these responsibilities. But like in the past, the communities may have also a role to decide whether the family can host a child. And of course, the village, we cannot set up this culture because village is pertaining to another epoch, but the quality of the relations may be lived in a very good network of families. I think that now we have to take on these responsibilities, and there are in Italy, for example, but not only in Italy, but I can know this experience. There are family associations specialized in helping families who want to adopt a child. It could be very useful because I think that the experience of these married people is very tough, and if they are not alone, they can be patient and host and adopt these children.
Right, next, Helen.
Thank you very much. I'd like to sort of connect, and also a bit like Jutta, a few different things, also Gustavo. Vigilio asked about the audience of our work, and John also said about we need to be in the public discourse. So I'd like to start off with that thing, but focus the comments on Vincenzo's talk, because the family associations is, in a way, it's the means for getting this thing into the public discourse. And I would say it's one of the main audiences for what we are talking about today. So I've got, I think, two main things I wanted to sort of discuss with you, Vincenzo, and other people, of course. One of the things is I get the impression that it's very much based on a lot of intense commitment of people in a voluntary way, which in one sense is great. But in another sense, it feels to me like there's such a lack of investment in this. Investment in the sense of putting resources, which may not be only financial, but into this really important, you know, they're going to other places. They're not being directed to this issue, you know? And I think this is an issue for the Catholic Church, I think, but it's also an issue more broadly. I mean, one of the things I'm thinking about, how could we deal with this, would be, could we imagine helping to encourage the formation of Muslim family associations? Or, you know, other kind of religious, because you bet on the question of the family, there's a heck of a lot that's shared. Maybe, okay, we've got Sharia law and things like this. Okay, we've got some problems. But, you know, an interreligious, I think, position in terms of the public discourse, especially in a country like UK, is far more powerful than Catholic one. People will take it much more seriously, you know. So that's the first thing. How are we investing in? How strategic is? Where, you know, what should we do about this? And then the other thing is, I was looking at this very interesting, and I think it's very amazing, the things that you were able to do at the Council of Europe, the McCafferty report on the conscientious objection, the thing about stopping the right to abortion, the thing on the surrogacy. So, you know, and these are really, I can imagine, tough fights, really tough fights. What they make me think of, though, again, it's to me, it's connecting with this limited investment, because we're sort of dealing with these really basic things, and we're not dealing with some of the things that we were talking about before, which is sort of how skewed the investment is in family life, the sort of consistent ethic of life thing that Cardinal Bernardin talked about. The Catholic Church gets typecast as being interested in abortion, in surrogacy, in all those kinds of things, and not in these other issues, which are the ones that we are really interested in, you know. So I think it's all connected in my mind with this, how do we make this much more central to our work, you know? Thank you.
To cry, eh? I don't want to cry because really, you know, I am volunteer. You know, I am volunteer. But I think that the president must be volunteer, because you have to be free to say, I don't agree with you. Okay? So, but we need an office. I have an office with 2 employees, very, very skillful, but with a big faith. Okay? And I can do everything because I have these people. I have a budget of 150,000 euros. Okay? So my competitors are, there are many, and they have millions and millions of budget. Okay? And it's true. It's very difficult. It's very tough. And we can do that, but we also now, we are much more than in the past aware of our function. So and I think that is also very important that all the problems that we speak about today, I live in my life, okay? Because I have economical problems as my family, because I have 3 children. For me, it's difficult. The tax rate now is incredibly huge. And what I say now is something that I'm experiencing in my life. That's why maybe now I can also convince somebody. So I suffer this situation, private situation, I use this sufferance in order to convince people that the families, the community of families is in the middle. Because, for example, just one example, in Italy, we had during the pandemic time the problem of the Catholic schools. But it seems that the problem was of the schools, not of the families. So the schools made lobby, but they did not involve families in. So it's a problem not only outside, but also inside. So we needed to invest to be very professional, because we are professional. When we talk with the president of the European Commission, we are very much professional. When we do proposals, they are very good proposals. And we try to convince others to help us also to, because Nicola Speranza was the guy here, he's very, very much known everywhere in the Council of Europe, and they trust him. So you are, this is what we're doing. So I think that my dream is we have a problem of lack of representation. So this is the point. We have to solve, first of all, solve these problems. And we have proposals. Our first proposal is to imagine each parish with a network of family. For example, in many countries, you have parish and you have Azione Cattolica in Italia, but many Boy Scout, everywhere you have, but you do not have a network of families. It depends on the charisma of the priest. So if you start from this way, we solve this issue and we can be generative for the church on one side and also outside.
Okay, I just want to let folks know, we've got several people in the queue still. Ana Marta, Pier Paolo, Vittorio, Rocco. So, Ana Marta.
Thank you. Actually, this is just an innocent philosophical reflection. Perhaps it cannot lead anywhere. But anyway, the point is that we all agree that the state and the market rely on families in many ways. Families do a lot of social and civic work, yet they are under a lot of pressure, especially economic pressure. You are very convincing on that regard. So the point is how to give adequate recognition and recompensation to families for the work that they actually do. So I assume this is, from an economic point of view, it involves reversing the order. Instead of having families in service of the labor market, having the labor market in service of the family. But during this plenary, a lot of interesting suggestions came out. The family salary, as Rocco presented it, then the corporate family responsibility, as Stefano put it, then we have been talking about the social subjectivity of the family, and this has to find an adequate recognition at the juridical level. For instance, at the fiscal level. So an important issue would be what it means having fair taxes. So a lot of things are here, but how can you put all these things together so that they make a real impact? And, and the social subjectivity of families really gets some recognition in practice.
That is a wonderful synthesis, Ana Marta. Thank you very much. I've got Pier Paolo and then Vittorio.
Well, I don't want to take too much time. My intervention is like a reminder and a wish at the same time. In respect to what Cardinal Parolin said when he wrote us, we need to develop new relational competence. Now, the question was to the three speakers of this afternoon, what is done in the economic field to raise relational competencies? I do not see anything. Relations are used in a very instrumental way. Also, the relational goods, Ulaner adopts a rational choice approach to the relational goods. and understand the relations in a very instrumental way. That is, the seller uses the relations in order to sell his or her commodities. I wonder within the family associations, what is done to raise the relational competencies both of families and associations as such. I, for a long time, insisted that they should raise as associations, that is, as a network of families, their relational competencies. Most associations behave as a lobby, as a political party, as a trade union, as something which is not a place where relational competencies are developed. Same question to John. I wonder what is the relational competencies of the judges and the professionals you mentioned talking about family mediation. I don't know, the question is, if we look at the guardian ad litem system, what is its efficacy in terms of relational competencies? What is done in terms of training judges and professionals in having more relational competencies? So I understand this is a very broad question, but I would like to focus on that, because if you don't develop relational competencies, we are thinking of other things in the economy, in the field of family association, and also in the juridical service. Thank you.
Really profound question. So John and then Vincenzo.
A brilliant question and really nicely put. Oddly enough, the answer comes from the Human Rights Act 1998, because for 2 years the act was suspended before it came into actual law. And for the first time, judges were trained, really trained to be judges, because our system has always been the advocate is his own best friend. Not true. The advocate trains himself or herself. Not true. Judges are simply advocates who've done their own training for themselves, who then become judges. It's that sort of old-fashioned system. So the judges then became accustomed to the training as an ethos, as a necessity. And leading from that really remarkable principle, which Lord Irvine introduced and Tony Blair signed off on, I think it was that order, then the Judicial Council is called, an anonymous kind of body, but it actually does require, under the presidency of the family court, to supervise the training of judges. Now, it's a pity our judge has gone home, but he is extremely well trained in some of the things you're saying. But your question, it goes beyond that, as you know. And the question is really, what good does that do if the other parts are not working together? And I think, at least I can only say this in a modest way, I think that because my report was not written by a politician, because I wasn't paid for it, it was a pro bono, people took it more seriously. Not because of the value of the report, I assure you, or its merits, but they did take it seriously because there was no cost benefit to not looking at it as it said. It was a genuine attempt to put it together. And therefore, you have family associations working with the mediators, and the mediators are training the judges how to mediate. You know, that's one of the great chemistry moments. So I think what you're talking about is the alchemy, I would call it, the alchemy of change. The alchemy of change. It's not something that's in a formalistic algebra. It's in how we as humans interact with each other. So the judge says, hold on, what are you saying? You then look it up and understand it. And I'm struck by the open-mindedness of many of the family court judges. And just if I've got one little second, one of the problems I had was I didn't know what to do with people who lied to me. It's a really important question. If someone lies to you in an official capacity, what do you do? You're contaminated by the badness of the lie, the mischief of the deception. So I went to, how we say, senior people, and no one had asked that question. You know, asking the question is better than sometimes knowing answers or pretending to know the answer. And they were actually quite helpful in recognizing the lie did not disempower me, but empowered me. So I could then reject the lie quite openly by arguing its inconsistency and its illogicality. Now, I think that's beginning to happen. And that's where the correlation, that's where the alchemy, I call it, of human relations plays out. Judges are human. They need that alchemy to make it work. Mediators are similarly. And oddly enough, even the bar council and solicitors, they have come, by any standard, kilometers from where they were even 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm not suggesting it's all good. It's not, because the legal aid has gone down and the poverty is depressing. But at least there's a conversation. A conversation. That's another part of the alchemy. Sorry, too long-winded, but I hope it gets...
Very good, alchemy. Vincenzo, and brief response to relational competency.
Very complicated, but in any case, we need a strategical envelopment because, in the past, Pierpaolo, we spent a long time just defending families and defending the identity of the families because it was the time to do that. But now is not anymore the time to do that. And we have also to be aware of our function. And so it's up to us to start again with a new and with a novelty of communication. And it's a task of your academy, but it's also the task of the parish. So we need to encirclement, to start this encirclement, because if you start this bottom-up, up-bottom procedure, I'm sure that we can do that because we have very good experience. If you go to the ground, we see that there is mutual help among families. But the point is, no one recognizes it. Even the canonic law, there is no function for family association. So now we have to write a new book. And we are here to inspire this. Because our associations on the ground now, for example, they are doing something. But no one knows that. And there is no chance to contaminate. Because the beauty, as we said, in Albania, for example, I repeat myself, but in Albania, the family associations made conversion to Catholicism. Really, they do that. And they have priest vocations. I mean, we have a hope. If you look at the ground, we can see that the families go on. The point is, we have to be inspired by them, and we have to give them the dignity of the function that they are still carrying out now. So, please, let's speak about families. It's not a part of our interest, it's our interest, and we can talk about everything departing from the family as an example, as an inspiration. I can speak about public law, I can speak about economy, I can speak about even about languages, bilingual, everything you can speak, just departing from the needs of the family, not the needs of the individuals. If you do that, we can have a perspective. Otherwise, it's just like the family association will become a normal trade union.